Okay, so I recently released a video over on MockRock talking about some moves that I consider to be overrated, or in some cases more just have weaknesses that some people don't necessarily know about, and a topic that came up several times in that video was out of shield options, so today's tie-in video is the top 10 out of shield options. The thing about out of shield options though is that if this were just left to purely a literal top 10 power list, they'd basically all be up Bs out of shield. That's because there's usually a penalty for getting out of your shield. You either need to take a few frames to drop your shield or to jump out of it. Whereas up Bs out of shield completely bypass this penalty, and so do up smashes, but up Bs in general are way quicker, so they would pretty much dominate this category because frame data is so important in out of shield options. I thought that might be a little bit plain, so this list is absolutely going to be showing good moves, don't get me wrong, but I've also tried to strike a little bit more of a balance between showcasing a literal top 10, which would, again, basically all be up Bs, and showcasing at least a little bit of a variety of different categories of moves. I always find like the discussion/learning aspect of videos like these way more interesting than the rankings themselves, so just keep that in mind as we move forward. All right, let's do it. We'll start off with what I expect to be a pretty uncontroversial one, Mr. Gaiman watches fire. We'll breeze through this one a bit because I talked about it in the MockRock video, but bottom line, it's frame 3, which is literally as fast as any out of shield option can be in Ultimate. It also has invincibility on it for some godforsaken reason, has a surprisingly large hitbox, and is a great combo starter in addition to all of that. Extremely versatile move, can both be used to punish unsafe options on shield, and because of its hitbox and how quick it is, that means a lot of the game's moves, and also you can use it to preemptively anti-air people who are trying to jump in on you. Yes, as I talked about over on MockRock, it is actually a little bit more vulnerable if you whiff than people necessarily think, but the thing is, it's so quick that whiffing is not all that easy to do. The only thing to complain about with this move is that it's not literally perfect, and I mean, go cry about it. That one I expect essentially no one to argue with. This one I actually do expect a few more people to have issue with, and that is Min's Upsmash. I really don't know why this is on Min's kit. It did get nerfed pretty heavily in a patch, going from frame 7 to frame 8 and doing significantly less knockback, but the thing is, that still makes it one of the fastest and biggest up smashes in the game that also has a reflector property tacked onto it. Obviously, you can tell at a glance that the vertical hitbox is insane, which makes it again very good as a preemptive anti-air even before your opponent touches the shield, which is a little more valuable here because this is one of the slower options on the list, but also its horizontal hitbox is surprisingly good too. That means that trying to space around it isn't nearly as easy as you'd think, and this is Min we're talking about. Playing with space against her is already a bit of a tall order. Pre-nerf, I think this was the uncontested best up smash in the game, which was, again, just an insane thing to give to Min of all characters, but even post-nerf, I think it's still strongly in the running and is easily the best out of shield among them. Going back to a little bit more of a conventional one, Link's spin attack. Now, there are 3 variants of the spin attack in the game, and they all have their own uses and are all pretty good out of shield, but here's why I've gone with Link. Young Link, I think, is just kind of out of the running right away because his is by far the slowest out of them. His is frame 9 compared to Link's frame 7 and Toon Link's frame 6 spin attack. Now, the payoff for it is really good. It's the combo spin attack, whereas the others are more kill moves, but it's also fairly inconsistent where it sends your opponent. Apparently, even really good Young Link players don't necessarily know exactly where they're going to be popped out all the time, which means you need to be really quick on your follow-ups and don't always necessarily get exactly the one you want. That's not really enough to stop it from doing good things, though it still absolutely does. The main aspect is just the frame data on it. Toon Link, a frame faster, and that actually matters a fair amount in out of shield options. Every time you knock a frame off, it opens up a lot more attacks to being punishable out of shield, and it's a multi-hit, which means it's A, more consistent, and B, much less punishable on shield, because if Link hits his spin attack on shield, his opponent only needs to block the first hit, then they can just drop the shield and punish him while he's still stuck in the animation. Toon Link isn't safe on shield, but his opponent can't just block the first hit and drop their own shield, so the punishes he takes tend to be less extreme, and those are really good traits, but the thing that gives it to Link is just how insane the kill power on this move is if he connects the sweet spot. At the end of the day, it's just a way better kill move than Toon Link's while still being very fast across like the standard of all out of shield options in the game, and being able to offer that kind of threat from a position of relative safety is just so powerful. Next up, Snake's down air. It does 20% and is frame 3, which makes it a frame 6 option when you combine it with jump squat, and it can cover a lot of range because it's an aerial, and it's an aerial that even has a bit of a floating property to help him do that. Yes, the multi-hits can be a little bit inconsistent sometimes. You don't always get the full 20%, sometimes people pop out, sometimes you don't connect every single hitbox, but overall, like, what is there to complain about with this move? This is on a character that has so many projectiles and the ability to hold grenade and shield to make him even harder to attack, and some of the best burst movement and anti-air tools in the game. Danner is just the cherry on top of an already very stacked cake. I don't really understand Snake's archetype design all that much. I've talked about that a little bit before, but Danner is kind of the embodiment of just, you gave this character everything, didn't you? Still arguably not even top 10. A lot of that is the fact that mobility is just so important, but that is not the fault of his tools. Yeah, if you followed MockRock for any amount of time, you've probably heard me rant about this move at some point, but let's bring up a move that you might not have heard anyone talk about before. Mii Gunner's Cannon Jump Kick. This stupid move is frame 6, fully invincible, does a ton of damage, and has ridiculous kill power behind it. It goes up, which means you can mix it up a little bit more on a platform if you whiff, and it drags opponents up with you, which pushes them closer to the blast zone. This is the epitome of like, why do they give zoners all the best close quarters defensive tools that I was talking about in my The Problems with Zoners video. I didn't bring this one up specifically in there because at the time I was thinking, let's limit it more to moves that I think more people would have heard of. In retrospect though, I probably should have mentioned it. After all, at least in theory, they're kind of designing this character as the this is what zoners do in Ultimate character, and they decided to slap this move on it, and I don't know why. I didn't even talk about his hitbox. It's way bigger than you'd expect. Yeah, incredible move. Going back to another one that tends to come up a lot in Outer Shield discussions, Dr. Mario's Super Jump Punch. Frame 3 startup on an up special, which, reminder, makes it as fast as an Outer Shield option can possibly be, surprisingly large hitbox once again, and obviously notoriously high kill power. This move does have some pretty substantial weaknesses tacked onto it too though, and I'm not talking about recovery. Obviously it's a horrible recovery move, we all know that. It was blatantly designed to be a horrible recovery option, but that's not part of the criteria of this list. First off, its power is completely tied to a sweet spot sour spot mechanic, and the sour spot is horrible. It makes it terrible as a preemptive anti-air option, and also heavily contributes to the fact that this move often can actually put you disadvantageous on hit. Also, while its raw knockback is very good, the angle it sends your opponent at is actually pretty comfortable for them to DI. It's kind of just a straight 45, which means that if they know the matchup, they can actually often survive longer than you might expect them to be able to. It's still a good kill move, but I think at least some of its reputation comes at least a bit from matchup inexperience. Dr. Mario does not tend to be a very popular character, but one of the things that people do tend to bring up with him is how good his up Outer Shield is, and I mean, yeah, he's still on the top 10 list, even if it does have some flaws. We're going to Mario next, and he does have his own frame 3 up Outer Shield, but again, a little repetitive, so instead, up air. Mario's up air is frame 4, which makes it frame 7 with the jump squat, so not the fastest option on the list, and also not the longest ranged option either. Your opponent basically has to land directly on top of you. But Mario is super mobile, and trying to get into his opponent's face is already his game plan, so that's not really an unrealistic possibility. And the thing is, if Mario's up air does connect, which isn't that hard to do out of shield, it can literally kill people at like 30%, or at the very least lead into one of his notorious ladder combos, which just deals out insane damage. This is honestly probably one that would not make it onto the list if I was just strictly going for the literal top 10 most powerful options. It is pretty stubby, but as far as aerials out of shield are concerned, I think this is easily one of the best of them. It even beats out a lot of neutral airs, which generally tend to be the sort of go-to options for most characters. Coming up to another one that's a little bit more of a variety option, but also just has a lot of merit in its own rights, Diddy's Banana. The frame data for item tosses out of shield does vary a fair amount, but Diddy's is actually really fast at frame 7, which puts it comparable with a lot of other stuff on this list, and the reward for Banana is also among the highest of any item in the game. At low percents, leads into any combo starter you can possibly think of. At high percents, it's basically the same as hitting them with a kill move. Not the easiest move to whiff punish either, the ending lag is pretty good, and it also lets you do stuff like jump out of shield and Z-drop the Banana, which also leads to insane combos and preemptively puts you into the air for a combo starter. It's kind of crazy that Banana has been heavily nerfed across every new game, and yet it's still just incredibly good. Speaking of nerfed moves, Witch Twist. This move is frame 6 compared to frame 4 in Smash 4, which is obviously a huge nerf in context, but out of context, that's still really fast and still leads into some extremely high damage combos. Doesn't put her into free fall either, and she's got some really good mobility options out of it, so she's kind of just free to throw it out. It's really not that scary to whiff. technically possible to punish her for whiffing it, sure, but in addition to A, just needing really good reaction times, it also, B, is really scary to challenge Bayonetta in scramble situations because witch time is the thing, so she tends to get away with it a lot. Yeah, sorry to compare it to Smash 4, I know Bayonetta mains are very sick of that by now, having to listen to that in like every commentated set and every video about Bayonetta for the rest of time, but some wounds just don't heal, you know? Before we get to number 1, just want to list a few honorable mentions and why I personally did not choose to include them on this list. The Samus's screw attack is super quick, good preemptive anti-air, and has some kill power, but the kill power is not great, its horizontal range is quite short, and it also has a little bit of consistency issues with people popping out of it. I know Clad mains like to spam Climb Hazard like there's no tomorrow, but it's just not nearly as impactful as some moves on this list. Martha and Lucina's Dolphin Slash, quite quick, good range, has some invincibility thrown in for good measure along with a bit of kill power, but it is reliant on a sweet spot mechanic. Roy's Blazer has great horizontal coverage and some armor thrown onto it, but it's just a little bit slower to start up than the moves I went with. I could also have gone in a completely different direction with the armor and picked something like Ike's Ether or Donkey Kong's Spinning Kong. Moves that have essentially no use as a whiff punish, but are extremely good at calling people out with extremely heavy reward behind it. Which leaves us with one open slot, and you might notice there's a character I haven't included yet who tends to pop up a lot in Outer Shield discussions, and that, of course, is going to be Bowser with his Whirling Fortress. Bowser's a character that's generally had very mixed treatment over the years, but the one thing that has always been consistent is how incredible his uppy out of shield is. Moving forward all the way into Ultimate, it's still frame 6 out of shield, does a lot of damage, highly mobile so you can catch people even if they space themselves around it with some unsafer moves, and it kills. And all of that, even all of these years later, is still really good and a huge chunk of the reason why Bowser is considered to be one of the best heavies in Ultimate. Now, some of the reason this move is so talked about as far as out of shield options go is due to its legacy. There are other moves that I would say have caught up to and even surpassed Bowser at this point. I don't think that Whirling Fortress is still literally the #1 out of shield option, but if we're going to be having a discussion about out of shield options, you have to include it. Make no mistake though, this is not a legacy discussion. Even after all these years, Whirling Fortress is still something that almost any character would kill to have as an out of shield move. Just not as a recovery, but again, we don't need to talk about that. Alright, that'll do it for this one. Thanks for watching everyone, and hey, let me know what you thought of this list. If you liked the video, please consider leaving a like and or comment. YouTube's algorithm right now is heavily satisfaction based, so that lets it sort of know, okay, people are engaging with this video as we're spreading around to more people. And let me know what you think of the new studio setup. There's still a couple little things to do here and there. That cable behind me there needs to go. I might do a couple more lighting tweaks and stuff like that, but overall it's basically done. I know like gaming channel backdrops tend to have a lot of like game controllers and figurines and collections and stuff like that, but I just don't really own a lot of that kind of stuff. But one thing I have collected a fair amount of over the years, this is like a fraction of it you're seeing, is music gear. And considering my channel is kind of indirectly named after my Mockingbird guitar, it seems appropriate. New layout too. I'm not doing any of this in post. These are all just OBS scenes that I'm switching between in real time, so hopefully I didn't forget to make any proper switches. We'll see when I get to editing this. But yeah, leave me any feedback on it. If you want more from me, you can follow me on Twitter at Mr. MockRock, Twitch at MockRock Twitch, that's one word, and I also have a Patreon under MockRock. Patrons, Twitch subscribers, and YouTube members get stuff like early video access to my Discord server, content polls, and more. Check them out if you're interested, but in any case, that's it for now. Later, people! So purely from the sense of using it like a grab, it's a little underwhelming. The flip around effect doesn't have any true follow-ups. It doesn't do that much damage. The range is pretty good, but it doesn't have a whole lot else going for it. However, but those comments got me thinking, what would an overrated moves list look like? Well, like